Hello and welcome to the Megacast by Actual Tech Media. Today's topic, supporting, extending, and protecting virtual environments. Thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate everyone out there in the Actual Tech Media audience taking time out of your day to join us on the Megacast. We want to make this worthwhile. We want to make this a great event for you. We at Actual Tech Media, we're all former IT professionals ourselves. We know how tough it can be out there in the world of enterprise IT. And we designed the Megacast to help with those challenges, help you to get your questions answered, and help you to learn about some of the most innovative technology solutions in the world of enterprise IT today. Help you to do it quickly and efficiently. You don't have to leave your home or office. And, while you're learning about some really cool technology, maybe win some prizes in the process. And speaking of which, we've got some mega prizes on the Megacast today, as I like to say. Now, before we get started, there's just a few things that you should know about today's Megacast. I'll be talking more about the prizes here in just a moment, but questions. We do have a questions pane there in your audience console. It's right next to the word handouts. You'll see the handouts tab. You'll see the questions pane right next to that. We see hundreds of you out there already saying good morning, hello. We appreciate that. We welcome that. I see folks from across the United States and around the world. So thank you so much for those good morning and hello messages. We also want your technical questions, though, because we will be doing live Q&A sessions with each of today's expert presenters. And honestly, I need your questions. And to help shake some of those questions loose, if you will, we have our best question prizes, which I'll be talking about in just a moment. And then I'll also have some poll questions for you throughout the process here. I'll have a few polls at the start and then one after each of today's presenters to get your feedback, on the solutions that you're learning about on the Megacast. And then social. We want this to be a social event. On the right-hand side there, you'll see a Twitter icon on your audience console. And if you tweet using that Twitter icon, the hashtag for today, which is ATM Megacast, will be automatically appended to your tweet. I'll be monitoring Twitter throughout the event. And of course, we appreciate you spreading the good news about what we're doing here on the Megacast. If you learned something cool or if you just want to share today's topic with your friends and colleagues out there on Twitter, we encourage you to do that. And then resources. There in the handouts tab, there are hand-selected resources by each of today's expert presenters in the order of their presentations. You'll see getting started URLs, trial links, ebooks, solution briefs, white papers, all sorts of great technical resources. So make sure that you download those before you go today or click on the link to check out those resources for additional information. Like I said, we've got an incredible lineup of prizes, as we always do on the Megacast. We've got 5 Samsung 49-inch curved gaming monitors. Wow, I wish I had one of these. 5 of you will be winning these today, and we'll also be giving out Amazon $500 gift cards after each of the presentations. You must be live in attendance to qualify for the prize drawings, and I'll be announcing the winners here live on the event. Of course, if you're watching this on demand, later, the event has already occurred. The prize terms and conditions can be found right there in your handouts tab. And as I mentioned, we also have our best question prize for $50 Amazon gift cards, and not just one, but one after each session, one for each of our Q&A sessions. Of course, you have to ask a question to be entered into that drawing and also meet the Actual Tech Media prize policy, and we'll be contacting those prize winners after the event. Like I said, the prize terms are there in the handouts tab. All grand prize winners must submit an IRS Form W-9 to Actual Tech Media, and all prize winners have the option to make a donation to selected charities that you see here on the screen. Over the years, we've donated thousands of dollars to charity, and thanks to generous prize winners such as yourselves who win a prize and would like to donate their prize value to charity. And I love hearing the stories of folks who do this. Just last week, someone won a laptop and they donated that prize value to the Cancer Research Institute. Someone else asked if they could donate their prize value to St. Jude's the week before that. And so, it's just been fantastic. We have loved to help folks donate to charity. We've done this in partnership with the Gorilla Guide Book Club. I'll talk more about that in just a second, but the Gorilla Guide Book Club is over at gorilla.guide, and you can find the link to that there in your handouts tab as well. But first, social. The hashtag for today is ATM Megacast over on Twitter. And like I said, you can tweet directly from the audience console. The hashtag, or you can follow Actual Tech Media on Twitter as well. We are at Actual Tech Media, and you can follow me, your moderator for today, David M. Davis on Twitter as well. Subscribe to all the Actual Tech Media social channels on YouTube, Facebook, and the 10 on Tech podcast. On the top right-hand side of your audience console, you'll find hyperlinks to our YouTube page, Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter, all right there. So make sure that you check those resources out. We post all of our latest and greatest content on LinkedIn. So if you had to pick just one, I encourage you to follow us on LinkedIn. Now, as I mentioned, the Gorilla Guide Book Club is over at gorilla.guide. This is where you can download free, easy-to-read enterprise IT books authored by top industry experts. These are fun reads. You can download them, put them on your Kindle or iPad, mobile device, read them at your leisure, and stay up to date on enterprise technology. So I encourage you to check that out. There's also a link there in the handouts tab to the Gorilla Guide Book Club. And then there's also a link in the handouts to the Refer a Friend page. So we at Actual Tech Media appreciate you sharing any goodness that you've learned here on the Megacast with your IT friends and coworkers by inviting them to our upcoming events. And if you do that, both you and your friend could win an Amazon $300 gift card. We hold that drawing monthly, and you can go to the Refer a Friend page there in the Handouts tab. And actually, at the end of the event, you'll be automatically redirected to this page as well. We promise not to spam your IT friends. We'll send them an invitation with a list of our upcoming events. If they don't respond, we'll send them one more reminder like, hey, don't forget to join our events. If they don't respond, then no worries. So we appreciate you participating in that if you would like to share what we're doing here on the Actual Tech Media event series. Now, before I introduce you to our first presenter and actually do a few polls, I want to just talk briefly about today's topic. Why should we care about supporting, extending, and protecting virtual environments? Why is the virtual environment so critical to begin with at all? Well, it's because for most of us, this is where our business critical applications are running. You might have your HR, your finance, your point of sale applications, all running inside virtual machines in your virtual infrastructure. And to everyone at the company, they assume that these applications are just always going to be up 24/7 by 365. These applications are expected to be up and running, just like Facebook or Netflix or their personal Gmail. They assume those applications are always going to be there, and it's our job in IT to really make it so. And also, these applications have to be secure. These are where the crown jewels of IT are stored at most companies, and so security is just assumed. We can't have a data breach. We can't have data exfiltration. That data must be secure. And the storage demand continues to increase for the virtual infrastructure. More and more storage capacity is consumed. That consumption never goes down, and the performance of the storage is being pushed, to the limit all the time. And we really have to protect this data with, critical data protection solutions that have a rapid recovery time objectives and zero data loss. And, kind of a note to self here, a ransomware incident in the virtual infrastructure would really be a disaster. We have to prevent that. And should that occur, we need to rapidly be able to get all of those virtual machines and all their data back. It can't take days or weeks or months to restore that data. It has to be back, almost immediately within hours at most companies, or maybe even some minutes for, specific critical applications. And disaster recovery must be in place. It has to be continually tested. And, for most of us, we have compliance requirements and service level agreements of some kind. If they're not legal requirements, they might be just requirements with the executives at the company and the end users. And then really to know that it's all performing well and that security is working and we don't have network congestion and performance issues. We need visibility to prevent downtime. And if downtime occurs, we need to be able to rapidly investigate and remediate whatever problem it is that's causing that downtime. And so how do we accomplish this? Well, we need new innovations. Legacy tools aren't going to cut it. Legacy data protection solutions, storage solutions, security solutions, they're just not going to do the job. Thankfully, we have new innovative solutions that you'll be learning about on the event today that can make this far easier than ever before. Far more efficient, far more intelligent. We need cloud-enabled tools. That's ideal for a variety of different reasons. For example, getting our data off-site. These solutions have to be affordable. We're continually pushed to do more with less in the IT organization, and not just with our staff, but also with our budgets. We need scalability for the future. We need to be able to scale out to the cloud or scale out our existing on-premises infrastructure. As we said, security is paramount, and we really need extensibility, to work with other tools and other applications and with the public cloud and software as a service applications as well. And we need to be able to, prove the value of these tools and the effectiveness of these tools to the business. And so that's the importance, as I see it, for today's topic and some ideas around how we can accomplish these challenges. And thankfully, I think we've got some awesome solutions here on the event today that you'll be learning about from Gigamon, Rubrik, Zerto, Druva, and Rapid7. Now, before I introduce you to our first presenter, I've got a poll question for you. And that is on the screen now. It says, which of these are a top priority for you in your IT organization? And this is a multi-select question. So, most of us have more than one top priority, unfortunately. And we have to be tasked with, not just one project at a time. So I'll be sharing the result of this poll question with you, and you can see how you stack up with your peers on the event today. And I'll give everyone a moment to respond to this. All right, thank you to everyone who responded there to the poll. We appreciate your feedback. If there's something on the list, or if you have a project that's on your list that's not on this list, drop it there in the questions box, and I will share it with everyone out here on the Megacast today. We do want to hear your feedback. All right, if I share the results of this, it looks like 70% said improving security, by far the greatest, highest priority for everyone out there, followed closely by improving data protection and disaster recovery, followed in third place by greater visibility. So thank you to everyone who responded to that. And then final poll question before I introduce you to our first presenter who is ready to go. The question on the screen is, what's your time frame for adding new or updating your existing IT solutions? We're talking about, improving a variety of different solutions, data protection, we said visibility, storage, security. So the question really here is, what's your time frame for taking some kind of action? All right, thank you to everyone who responded there to that poll. And with that, it's time to kick off today's Megacast with our first presenter. I'm excited now to introduce you to Mr. Gordon Beath, Senior Director of Product Marketing at Gigamon. Gordon, are you there?
Yes, I am. Thanks very much for the great introduction there.
Absolutely. It's great to have you, Gordon. Take it away.
All right. Well, thanks very much. I will. Good day, everybody. Yeah, so I'll take us through a bit of a section talking about how we can actually help to improve the management and protection of cloud and virtual deployments that were just nicely presented there in the beginning. So we're going to go through lessons that can be learned from the physical on-premises type of networks that we're used to in the past. We'll talk about how cloud or virtualization, how it changes this, or does it really change it, and then address some of the issues that are related to visibility and then we'll just finish off with a bit of a preview of what some of the things that we can provide to help address this at Gigamon. So let's start off with the lessons that we've learned from physical on-premises networks. As you're probably all familiar, is that the infrastructure that exists within on-premises networks, physical ones, is quite varied in terms of speeds and technology and so on, and even the applications themselves vary a lot. And likewise, the actual events and logs that come out of those applications also vary. And typically a lot of monitoring for what was going on in the devices, if you think back not even 20 years ago, 10 to 20 years ago anyway, between the last decade and the 2 decades and the decade before that, people seem to think that events and logs were enough to monitor, but they actually pretty well discovered that the network traffic data was really important as well. And so then methods were devised in ways to actually get access to that network traffic to improve what they were trying to achieve with their ensuring the actual performance and operation, troubleshooting, as well as security of the network. So as I talked about, they felt that events and logs were sufficient, but the problem is that they didn't really give a true indication what was going on with the network elements or the applications, largely because if one of those elements, one of those applications are impacted, have actually been affected in some way, then the actual logs and events that come out of them may also not be reliable because of how they've been affected. So therefore, there's some level of inconsistency about how you can trust that data that will come to you. And furthermore, every single type of network element that's out there, as well as different applications, will provide different types of events and logs, and they're not all standardized. So therefore, it made it even less consistent in the types of data that you would actually receive. So not just the infrastructure of events from the network elements, but the applications themselves have the same types of issues. Whereas when it comes to the network packets, so the actual traffic that's on the network itself being communicated between the network elements and the applications and between clients, that's actually what's going on in the network. That really shows what's happening, that there is something happening, and from it you can actually devise and fairly closely determine where the source of the problems may be. And of course then that the logs and events that you're receiving from those elements really help to round out the entire picture. So it's not saying that the events and logs shouldn't even be used at all. That's definitely not the story. The whole point is that the network traffic data shows that something really is happening and gives a very good indication of exactly what that is. And then the logs and events can show, it will actually provide extra collaboration about, yes, confirmation that there is something happening, and it's happening with a certain one or two or several elements that are involved. The next diagram is really talking about pictorially what I was kind of describing, and then saying, well, okay, I want to get access to the traffic on the network. What are the challenges associated with getting access to that traffic and making sure that all the monitoring applications that I have for assuring performance, doing troubleshooting, ensuring security, and also meeting any other type of third-party needs that may want to look at the traffic. How do I ensure that I can get copies of all the traffic that's on the network, as well as getting it to all the tools and the type of traffic to all the tools that need to see it? That was one of the biggest problems I had, say, roughly 10 years ago. And that problem doesn't really go away now that we move into the virtual space. When you get into the virtual space, you still have these public clouds, private clouds, the private clouds being on-premises type of virtualization environments. And most likely, you've still got some kind of a physical data center. Not everybody has that. But in particular, if you're moving from a physical on-premises type of situation, and then you actually either want to virtualize some of the applications, still keep them on-premises, or if you want to move those applications off into the public cloud, that type of digital transformation means that you're going to have at least 2 different environments running at the same time, and probably even more than 2. And so therefore getting access to the traffic and being able to see that traffic, which contains the truth, and minimizing the chance of having blind spots, being able to reduce the complexity of how it is to try and get the traffic from the network, and also try and keep the costs associated with managing and monitoring a network to a minimum. All of those are still a challenge to do that when trying to get access to all the traffic in the different locations, and making sure that all of the applications that you're trying to run will actually get copies of the traffic that they need. So as I said, a lot of that still applies from the physical world into the virtualized and cloud world. But then at the same time, the challenges are not completely the same. So while cloud and virtualized infrastructures and the applications themselves, ultimately from a high level, do perform similar functions, they carry traffic backwards and forwards between them. They actually perform a lot of the same type of operations as they did when they were sitting on premises in a physical form. And of course, there's new applications out there as well, but that goes without saying. But the thing is, there's still always going to be traffic. All the elements and applications are still going to provide logs and events, so you can still collect all of those. So you can get the source of truth that you need and the corroboration of what's going on from the events and logs. But now you've got this situation where the east-west traffic that's traveling between the various applications, it's no longer physically accessible in any way. So therefore, you need some way of being able to get access to that traffic using some type of software-based technique. And because there's so many different types of infrastructures, which in a way you could think of as a little bit similar to the physical world, where you had all sorts of different types of technologies used in a physical infrastructure, in the virtual and cloud space, obviously there's different types of infrastructures you could have. You may actually have applications running in AWS, you may have some in Azure, some in Google Cloud, you might even have some in Oracle Cloud. It's really up to you how you want to run those applications and where you get the best economics from the applications running in one of those clouds. And then when you're on your own premises, or maybe leasing space in someone else's premises, you're running a kind of a private cloud situation, which could be running in VMware or Nutanix, or running on some OpenStack variety like Red Hat. Any of those, they're all different environments, and they're all going to be a little bit different on how you can get access to the traffic within those environments. And on top of that, then you've got different types of technologies. The most common ones are the virtual machine approach, which has been around for quite some time, and then in more recent times, the containerization type approach, and then even the serverless types of approaches. All these different types of base technologies mean that you need to have different techniques and different ways to get access to the traffic. And then finally, the other challenge, which sometimes gets overlooked, is that when you copy traffic within the virtualized network, and you say, okay, I can use, for instance, I could use a mirroring service that's sitting inside that environment, such as AWS has their mirroring service in there. We know that VMware, for instance, has one as well, and there's ways to do it with an OpenStack and so on. Any of these types of mirroring services, that's great. I can get a copy of the traffic. But once I've got that copy, do I really want to be sending all of that traffic out? Because if I do, I'm actually going to be using up a lot of valuable bandwidth. Because in particular in a public cloud, you have to pay for traffic that's actually exported if you have devices outside that specific cloud environment to do the monitoring. But also it's using up bandwidth within the actual environment itself, because even though it's all in software, it is virtualized. Essentially it's running on hardware, and there are hardware buses and highways and stuff sitting in there that the software is the different applications and so on are actually communicating over, so that you can create bandwidth hogs just purely by doing lots of traffic mirroring. And then, and particularly if you mirror multiple copies, which can be done in some cases, off to a handful of different devices, therefore you're actually generating a lot more. So therefore you need to have some way to optimize the traffic to be more intelligent about what you forward and keep your costs down. And finally, of course, north-south traffic is likely to be encrypted. We know there's a lot more encryption now on the networks, in particular once it leaves a particular environment. And so there needs to be some way to be able to decrypt that, to be able to look at the application layer of information that's in the traffic, so that application monitoring and security monitoring can do their jobs more effectively. So addressing these issues, obviously, as I mentioned before, we're trying to address the blind spots, reduce complexity, and minimize costs. So I talked about the need to support multiple clouds, so that's an obvious one. But not just support multiple clouds, but be able to support it under a single management console. So it doesn't matter where your applications or services might be running, whether they're running in multiple public clouds, you might be running some of them on your own on-premises private cloud. It doesn't matter where it is, you still want to manage it all as one and keep track of what's going on and the communications between them. So therefore, we need to be able to manage it under a single umbrella. And there's different cloud technologies, as I mentioned before, which also naturally includes the operating systems that you're going to have installed in them, have your applications running on. And then there needs to be flexibility in it to provide users with choices of how to get access to the traffic. So how do I acquire it? You could use the services I mentioned before that could be built into the virtual environments. Or maybe you don't have access to that, or you may not trust it. So therefore we can actually deploy some type of an agent-based tapping mechanism associated with each of the applications or services that are installed and running, and make sure we can get a copy of the traffic out from each of those. And so being able to provide this flexibility of different types of methods for acquisition, including the fact that there can be multiple ways, even within built into the environments, multiple ways to get access to the traffic. So providing flexibility allows users the choice based on their needs and the traffic types, and also the level of trust of the infrastructure that they're installed on. And that sort of leads into the need for traffic optimization. So great, so I've got a copy of the traffic. I've used one of these types of traffic acquisition methods to get a copy of the traffic. How do I actually now reduce and target just the specific traffic that's of interest to each of the monitoring applications I need to get it to? Because there's always going to be certain types of traffic that are not that interesting to some tools. They don't expect it at all. Or maybe they just inspect the outer layers of the traffic and they don't care about the actual payload itself that's being carried. So therefore, there's different techniques to be able to filter out traffic that's not required, target in on traffic that is very important, take off chunks of the traffic that's not needed, even mask over or modify specific elements and content within the traffic to meet regulatory requirements on privacy issues and security needs. To do decryption of the traffic, that's another option. Or it could be just to generate metadata representation of the traffic, because some of the monitoring applications, such as like SIM tools, they don't really need to, in fact, a lot of them don't even want to see the raw packets. They would actually prefer to see the key elements from the traffic itself, so we can forward that out there as well. So you can generate that from the actual traffic. And then finally, the way to actually purchase the product is important. Don't just base it on numbers of traffic access points or the numbers of devices you're going to feed the traffic off to, or the number of instances of the virtual applications that are being used to do this visibility function. Instead, base it around some kind of usage-based model where whatever amount of traffic is being ingested and processed, that's the way to actually pay for it, and therefore you're only paying for what you're actually using. So I think that's probably another smart thing that should be considered in there. And this is just a quick snapshot of what I was talking about of best practice. We're having a visibility and analytics fabric that includes all those things that I just talked about, sitting between the actual the infrastructure and the applications, getting access to that traffic, processing it using all the techniques I just talked about, and then forwarding it on to the different applications you may have, whether those applications are actually sitting in the same virtual environment, they could be sitting in a different cloud environment, or they could still be physically on premises. It's really your choice to meet the requirements and needs that you have that will actually probably most likely evolve over time. So the solution should be able to help you evolve and move the traffic to where those devices happen to be, and the different tools as you change them. All right, so we'll just do a quick introduction into Gigamon. So we are seen as the trusted and innovative market leader within our space when it comes to visibility, and that's not just within the physical domain, which we've been in now for 15, 16 years, but it's also now in the virtual space as well. And you can see all the numbers of different types of customers that use us across the world, and there's quite a few of them. The key thing is what we offer. We offer an architecture which is actually now branded Hawk, and this architecture encompasses all the products and offerings that we have within Gigamon. It starts off with the GigaView FM Fabric Manager, and so it's a single fabric manager, single pane console to be able to manage any visibility across any type of environment. We've got the cloud suite of products that are used within public. It's basically the same product that you use within a public domain, so a public cloud domain, or in a private cloud domain. So it doesn't matter whether you have virtualization on premises or you've got your application running off and hosted in the public cloud. You essentially use the same product, the cloud suite, to get access to the traffic and process the traffic in those environments. And then we've also got hardware appliances back on premises that can be used, and they can do certain specific functions. There's a couple of functions that are very unique to the physical world that don't really necessarily match the virtualized world. And naturally, as I show here in this diagram, we can actually feed tools in any of those locations, and we can also take traffic feeds from each of those locations and feed them to the tools in the other location as well. So it gives you full flexibility across your different environments. So with that, I'd like to pause and see if there's any questions.
Absolutely, yeah. We do have some questions for you, Gordon. while we do that, I'm just going to bring up a poll question for everyone out there in the audience that says, what would you like to learn in addition to this about Gigamon? And this is a multi-select question, so feel free to select more than one answer there. And if you have a question about Gigamon, now is the time to get it in. We've got a lot of good questions coming in already. So first question I wanted to ask you, Gordon, is Keaton's asking about Gigamon integration with the major public cloud providers. If folks have applications running in the cloud, can Gigamon still help with visibility?
Correct. Hopefully that's what I was trying to get across in my message there. Yes, we can. That's definitely what we can do. You can either deploy. We can do it in many ways. You can deploy our cloud suite that I just showed before in any one of these environments. The major ones. Think about AWS, Azure, Google Cloud, Oracle Cloud. There may be some other oddball clouds out there as well. I believe we could probably even support Alibaba Cloud. There's no trouble with that at all. So we've got solutions within the cloud suite to be able to be used in any one of those environments. And then you can actually couple that, as I mentioned before, combine that with our physical devices that are used on premises, if that is the way you want to actually handle your traffic and your monitoring.
Excellent. Excellent. Let's see. Next question. How does Gigamon Hawk get access to traffic that's inside containers?
Yeah, that's a fair point. And actually, I should have mentioned that during my presentation. The way we do that is obviously within a containerized environment, you have container pods, and we can be used. We have a virtual tapping function that can be used to get access to the traffic within the pods. But we also have some integrations with some infrastructure vendors. If people are familiar with service mesh type architectures, we have integrations with F5 to be able to get access to the traffic through their mirroring service they offer with their SCP device, service mesh device, proxy device, I believe it is, and then we also have some integrations with other vendors like Nokia and even Ericsson for the service provider folks out there. Nokia works in both service provider and enterprise, I believe. But we have integrations with these guys to be able to get access to traffic within the containerized environments as well. So it doesn't just have to be our tapping function that's installed.
Okay, got it. I like that. Next question. You mentioned Gigamon Hawk. Is this a product that's currently available? They're asking.
Yeah, it's a fair point, and we get this question a lot. Now, Hawk is really, it's an architecture. It pulls together the number of products that we have within our portfolio and presents them as a hybrid cloud solution as a whole. So Hawk in itself is not really a product. It's a concept and an architecture, which is in essence really a solution, a total solution made up of our products, which consist of the GigaView Cloud Suite I mentioned before. It consists of the GigaView TA series, the GigaView HC series, and also the GigaView Fabric Manager. All of those products ultimately make up the Hawk architecture and solution.
Interesting. Okay, cool. That's an important point. I like that. And then what about security monitoring? Does Gigamon offer a security monitoring application?
That's a very good question. Yes, we do. We offer a product that's called Threat Insight, and Threat Insight is arguably at least from a technology perspective, if nothing else, the leader in the network detection and response space. So it is a very powerful tool which consists of some actual physical or virtual appliance functions to be able to crunch up and produce the right sort of data that's required as it's accessed through the visibility fabric from a virtual or physical environment, and then feeds it off into a SaaS type service that actually then provides the full network detection and response actions that you'd actually expect from such a device. But it is a very powerful solution, and has some of the best detection, investigation, and results when it comes to responses.
Very nice. Very nice. Let's see. I know we're starting to run out of time here on our live Q&A session, but Gordon, I count 26 more questions for you there. Excellent. Yeah, obviously there's a lot of interest in what you all are doing there at Gigamon. This is a big challenge folks are facing around visibility and security. So, Gordon, it's been great having you on the event today. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you very much, and I appreciate it. Thanks, everybody, for listening.
And thank you to Gigamon for presenting on today's Megacast. There's a link there in the Handouts tab for additional information. And I see right there on the homepage of Gigamon, there is information on Gigamon Hawk for cloud visibility. So make sure that you check that out. And of course, we appreciate your feedback there on the poll question on the screen. I'll leave that up while I announce our first Amazon $500 gift card winner. This is going out to Emmanuel Fassaranti from Illinois. Congratulations, Emmanuel Fassaranti. And our first grand prize for one of those 49-inch curved monitors, this is going out to Chris Shaw. Congratulations. All right, thank you to everyone who responded there to the poll question. We want to keep the Megacast here fast-paced and moving, and that means it's now time for our next presentation. I'm excited now to bring in and introduce you to Christina Avranova, Principal Product Marketing Manager at Rubrik, and Mike Preston, Technical Marketing Engineer, both at Rubrik. Christina and Mike, it's great to have you on the event today. I'll first hand it off to you, Christina. Take it away.
We'll begin with a story of Zephyr Fashion Group. We'll follow by a demo, and then we'll do a quick recap. So let us begin. Zephyr Fashion Group is a leading global fashion house headquartered in Gravity Falls, Oregon. It has multiple product lines, but most of the business is coming from an established flagship product line, Mabel. Zephyr has recently acquired a small line of stores called JED, which sells watches and accessories. Zephyr's environment is mostly core infrastructure powered by vSphere, utilizing individual data centers, stretch clusters, and VMC on AWS. The retail outlets leverage cloud-native workloads, and JED, their recent acquisition, has standardized on Nutanix AHV to provide infrastructure services. For data protections, ZFG is using Rubrik. Rubrik is delivering a true platform with core technologies to provide zero-trust data management for all applications in the data center, and in the cloud. Rubrik provides data immutability, append-only file systems that ensures that once written, data cannot be modified, compromised, or encrypted, thus protecting it from ransomware attacks. Sla Policy Engine, an intuitive policy framework that makes it simple to define RTOs and RPO requirements and then apply just a handful of policies across all applications. This eliminates the hundreds of backup jobs that are bane of IT administrators, freeing up valuable time for higher value add projects. Anomaly detection automatically discovers suspicious activity of their data, such as ransomware-driven encryption, and provide alerts so that IT teams can quickly and precisely investigate security incidents. Application recovery, a rapid recovery of applications and data at mass scale or one file at a time. And lastly, Rubrik is an API-first design, delivering all data management services via open APIs for full-fledged automation and integration into the IT environment. All of this is delivered as a unified, service-based platform that can be deployed in the data center or in the cloud. But as luck would have it, ZFG has been target of a cyber attack. Naturally, there is a state of panic. John is messaging Tina. Tina, the payroll app is down. We can't access the timesheets. Maybe there was an attack. We need to trace what else may have been affected. Tina replies, got it, I'm on it. I'll let you know what has been affected. A short while later, Tina replies, affected systems have been identified. I have restored from the latest copy before the attack. Everything is up and running now. Great, thanks, says John. We'll need to revise those security trainings though. But now let's see a live demo of how Tina was able to quickly identify the blast radius of the attack, understand what has been infected and if sensitive data has been exposed, and then proceed with recovery of the clean copy. Mike, over to you.
All right, thanks, Christina. So now that we've survived the attack, let me play the role of ZFG's IT department, and I'll show you exactly how to recover from attacks like the one Christina just walked through. As any good technologist, the first thing we really want to do is identify the blast radius. We want to ensure that we completely understand the scope of the attack and what exactly has been affected. I'll walk you through a product called Rubric Radar, which uses machine-based learning in order to detect anomalies and identify that scope for us. Second, once we find out what services, VMs, and files are impacted, the next step is usually revolving around identifying if any of that data affected is sensitive in nature. For this, I'll show you Rubrik Sonar, a data governance application that can identify predefined regulations such as HIPAA or PCI, as well as any custom regulations that may be applicable to your organization. Next, we get to recovery. Obviously, we want to get back up and running as quickly as possible, and Rubrik provides a multitude of different ways to do that. I'll walk through a bunch of our recovery options and explain when you would want to use one over the other, and we'll recover a few services for ZFG. And with Rubrik's Zero Trust Data Management, we can always ensure that our backups, once they are written, are immutable, meaning ransomware doesn't flow into our backup environment and encrypt our last line of defense. And finally, anytime there's been an attack, security teams are usually chomping at the bit to get in there and triage exactly what happened. I'll show you how we can build a clean room, basically an isolated network where we can instantly restore different point-in-time copies of our applications into. That way, the security teams can do their triage, check different restore points, and get to the root cause of the issue, all without having to worry that data is going to escape into the production network. So with that, let's jump into the lab and get going. First, we enter Rubric Polaris. Polaris is a SaaS-based offering by Rubrik that provides a global view of ZFG's environment. So here we can see that we have a number of Rubrik clusters in this environment. One could be in California, one in London, one in APAC. The point is we can manage them all from this unified interface. We can also see some nice rolled up stats as to how compliant we are in terms of our RPOs, as well as roll up of events that have been taking place. Now, one interesting event here is the anomaly event that's been detected. This means that Rubric Radar has flagged some suspicious activity within our environment. So let's drill into it. So right away, I can see our file server listed here, and we can get a little more information by drilling into it. We can see that on August 20th, Radar has detected a number of anomalies, a number of files being created, deleted, and modified, as well as high levels of encryption, a sure staple of a ransomware attack. Radar does this by taking two concurrent snapshots or backups and processing the metadata around them, analyzing them, and looking for key differences and anomalies, and then reports all that back to us. So let's go ahead and investigate this backup a little further. We can drill into exactly what's been affected. So we can browse through these folders here, and we can see that indeed our file share directory has been attacked. This is one of the huge benefits of Radar, is we can quickly see exactly where the ransomware is spread to and what it's impacted. A pretty tedious job if it needed to be performed manually. So if we wanted to, we could select some folders here and click next, and we get a few options. We can download these known good copies to our workstation for further investigation. We can restore them back to the original location, or if we wanted to, could recover to a different folder somewhere on the network. In the sake of this VM though, it's pretty infected. I think the best route is to restore the complete VM. So I'll exit out of here, and then I'm going to select to recover the full snapshot. Again, we get some more options. Like before, we can recover specific files and folders, or we have something called export. Export is a traditional type of recovery where we would copy all of the data off of the Rubrik platform and restore it back to the production data stores. We then have live mount. Live mount's much faster than the traditional export. In the case of a live mount, the Rubrik platform actually becomes a data store within your environment. And a new VM is created, and its disks map directly to those backup files located within Rubrik. Basically, this allows us to recover in essentially as fast as the underlying operating system can boot. We can also perform live mounts on individual disks if we'd like, and finally we have something called instant recovery. Instant recovery is very similar to live mount as it utilizes the Rubrik platform as a data store, but with the addition of it actually deprecates the original VM. Live mount won't touch the production source, whereas instant recovery will. In both live mount and instant recovery, we can get back up and running really quickly and then simply storage vMotion our data back to the production data store at a time that's really right for us. Now, since this is a pretty important VM that ZFG needs in order to get their employees paid, I'm going to go ahead and do a live mount on this. Live mounts are really simple. We just select where we want this VM to live. I'll just pick one of our hosts here and click finish. Rubrik basically does the rest. So we can click into the event here and we can see what's going on behind the scenes. So Rubrik's presenting them underlying backup files as a data store, calling the proper APIs into VMware to create a new VM with those disks. And we can see this process has started and it's happening pretty fast. So let's jump into vCenter and have a look. So I'll get logged in here. And then I'll go take a look at the cluster that the host belongs to. We can see our live mounted file server has actually already been created and is in the status of booting up. So essentially our file server is back online. So let's move on to the second task that we're faced with. Quite often, legal teams want to know a little more than just what services were affected, right? They want to know if any data in those services provided were part of some sort of regulation or compliance that the org needs to adhere to. So let me show you how we can find that out. We'll flip back to Polaris and I'll jump into an application called Sonar. So right away, we can see that Sonar's found a bunch of data that's being classified as sensitive. And if we head to our objects that are monitored here, we can see our file server is actually part of that and it contains some sensitive hits. So drilling in, we get that same folder browser where we could drill into exactly where these files are located, and we can see exactly what classification these files belong to. So in this case, we had a ransomware attack on our file server, which contained a bunch of data classified as US financials, PII, PCI, probably something our legal team would want to know about. So we can easily download a CSV of these affected files and send that across to them. Furthermore, we can also see exactly what users had access to this data at that specific point in time, which might be really useful to the security team to help pinpoint, any unsecure entry points or, compromised accounts. If we head up to management, I'll show you what Sonar actually comes with in terms of policies. So there's a number of pre-built policies for all the major compliance regulations. Now, you can use dictionary or regex entries as well to configure your own analyzers if your sensitive data doesn't fit into these sort of pre-compiled categories. So we've recovered our file server. We let legal know about any possible implications. We can now move on to that exposed web application. So we'll jump back into VMware and let's have a look. So our web app's basically made up of these two VMs, SQL01 and Web01. If we jump on the console for SQL, we can see that indeed it's been attacked. We have the ransomware message coming up. So to restore these VMs, I'm going to jump back into our local cluster to this data center rather than go through Polaris. No specific reason. I just want to show you that restores can be done without the need for Polaris or an internet connection, which is quite common during an attack scenario. So I've logged in, but I do want to note that we do support MFA on our local clusters as well. This is all part of Rubrik's Zero Trust Data Management solution. We're always thinking about how we can provide you with the most secure, immutable platform without sacrificing simplicity. So this is the main dashboard for the cluster. You can basically see an overview of what's happening with the system, what tasks are running, how much capacity we have left, how our data reduction is performing, and whatnot. We can also see a nice ring graph here as to how many VMs we have, how many are protected, and more importantly, what are we not protecting. And it's not just VMs either. If we expand this, you can see we support VMware, Hyper-V, physical Windows, Linux, SQL, Oracle, and as well as all of the cloud native applications like EC2 and Azure VMs and GCP. So the two services we want to restore though are VMs. So I'll head to virtual machines and then vSphere VMs. Now I can use my quick search here to narrow my results. I know these all start with ZFG, so let's filter by that. And there's my SQL, so let's dive into it. Now we can see a nice little calendar view here showing all of the backups that we've taken of this VM. Let's just move back and select an earlier snapshot that isn't infected with ransomware, and we'll click the ellipsis to see our options. Now, as you can see, we have those similar recovery options, right? Things like live mount, instant recovery, as well as we have the ability to do things like place certain backups on legal hold, meaning they won't be deleted even if the retention limit is met. We do have one new feature available to us here though called in-place recovery. Now, in-place recovery is new within our latest release, and it basically allows us to restore only those blocks that have changed, and it restores them back to the original virtual machine. So as you can imagine, this really saves us a lot of time if we need to restore VMs with very, very large disks, but have very, very little change rate, as only those change blocks need to be copied back. So let's go ahead and run this. Now, since this is affecting the original source VM, we do have the option here to keep a vSphere snapshot. That snapshot will refer to the source VM as it stands now. That allows us to always roll back our changes if need be. I'm good with the defaults here though. I'll just click recovery. All right, the task is kicked off. Let's take a look at it. As you can see, it's calculated we need to restore around 2 gigabytes worth of data back to this VM. So at this point, it's powering off that production VM, taking that vSphere snapshot, restoring the data, and then powering it back on and removing the snapshot. So through the magic of video here, we see that took roughly a couple minutes to complete. So let's go take a look at that production VM in VMware. So I'll launch a console to our SQL VM again, and let me get logged in. And there we have it. No more lock screen. No need to pay the ransom. We've restored a known good copy directly over top of our production VM, and we're back up and running. So this finally brings us to our last demo. If you can remember, the ZFG security team has been bugging me to deploy some sort of isolated network or clean room or sandbox, whatever you want to call it. They want to mount some restore points into it so they can test out different things, run their security tools, and see if they can't get to the root cause of the attack. So let me show you how to do this. First, in VMware here, I've created a new VM network called VM Isolated on a single host. And as you can see, it contains no uplinks. So there's no communication to the outside world for any VMs that are residing on this network. Secondly, I have a small Linux-based NAT router that I've deployed. One NIC is attached to the production network, and the other NIC's attached to this isolated network. Now, the isolated network's IP on this Linux router is actually our production gateway. That way, when the VMs get live mounted into this isolated network, they'll actually see the original production gateway. They'll actually think that they're in production, and they'll be able to talk to each other without any modification. And of course, I've added proper firewall and IP table rules. They've all been configured to ensure data can't traverse between the two NICs on my router. So with that, let's deploy some VMs into this network for our security team. So we'll jump back into Rubrik. We'll go find our VMs that power that external web application. That's SQL 01 and Web 01 again. And I'll select these and head to batch recovery, and we'll recover them both at the same time. I'm going to choose to live mount these, put them on the host where I have the isolated network, and begin the process. All right, now we can jump back into VMware and have a look. So we'll start by logging into our web server machine. I'll just simply put my domain credentials in here and oh, wait, I can't sign in. It can't find a domain controller, right? It's in an isolated network. Well, thankfully, this is an easy fix. So let's jump back into Rubrik, and now I'll search for my domain controller, and let me go ahead, find a restore point, and I'll issue a live mount on it as well. I'll place that on the same host, put it into that isolated network, and click mount. So that process is kicked off now. And remember, it's very, very fast. So let's jump back onto our web server and see if we can't log in now. So I'll put my domain password in again. And there we go. We're in. We've successfully granted our security team a copy of our production environment as it was at the time of the attack. And we can see that the virtual machines all within this isolated environment are acting just as if they were in production, right? We can mount the the production domain controllers in there, production DNS if we need to. If it's a 3-tier app, you can have all of the services inside these isolated networks so they can properly do their triage. So with that, let's jump back into the slides and we'll recap everything. So hopefully you could see right now how Rubrik is doing much more than just backup. And in the case of ZFG buying into the complete Rubrik platform, this was absolutely the right choice and the right solution. They could identify the scope of the ransomware attack with Rubrik Radar, something that's not super easy to do. They've identified exactly what data has been affected and what that data contains with Sonar, making sure they're still adhering to any data governance regulations that they might have in place. Secondly, they ensured they were on the latest release. This is another thing that ZFG did right. Keeping Rubrik up to date is always a good idea. ZFG was able to get access to all the various recovery methods, including the new in-place recovery feature, which drastically reduces the recovery time objectives. And finally, powering all of this is Rubrik's Zero Trust data management platform. And at the heart of that lies immutability. The fact that once data has been written to Rubrik, it can never be changed. Well, this always ensures that your backups, your last line of defense, are always going to be there to save the day. So with that, I want to open it up for questions.
Great presentation, Mike and Christina. A really cool demo. Mike, you ready for some Q&A?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's do it.
All right. While we take your questions out there in the audience, I want to point out the poll that's on the screen that says, what additional information would you like about Rubrik? I see many of you have already discovered that. We appreciate your participation and feedback on it. So with that, let's see, first question that came in here, I see Mike, Mark is asking, does Rubrik provide all the same functionality in Azure that they do in AWS?
Yeah, that's a great question. It really depends what you're leveraging the cloud for. So Rubrik really has 3 main plays into the cloud. The first being cloud archive. So that's our ability to archive off backups to the cloud for long-term retention. And absolutely the same functionality is available in Azure, AWS, and GCP. You'll actually get a little more functionality in Azure at the moment because we do support smart tiering there. So you can, intelligently say, I want to keep X amount of backups in hot storage for, say, 60 days, and then after that, let's move them to cold storage so I can save a bit of money and things like that. When it comes to, protection of VMs running in Azure, again, very, very similar compared between GCP and AWS as well. You'll see some things in AWS just because we did that first. So you'll see things like file level recovery has been enabled there first, but it's definitely coming to Azure.
Nice. Very nice. Let's see. Next question. How accurate does Radar detect abnormalities or ransomware? Is there a chance of false alerts?
Yeah, I mean, as with anything, there's obviously going to be a chance of false alerts. So, I mean, even if a user goes in and starts, mass deleting files and creating files, like we're going to detect that. But the machine learning algorithm that it does use does sort of, after a while, assume that something's normal. So it basically, if the same thing's happening every night and we're not, flagging it, it'll start to realize that this is normal activity and not report so much on it. As well as we do offer, what's the right word for it? I guess like a probability level. So there is kind of like a threat level in Radar. So you can see that, here's a bunch of abnormalities and, we think, there's a 25% chance that this is ransomware. There's a 90% chance. We do have sort of like a threat high, medium, and low level within Radar as well.
I like that. That's smart. Let's see. Next question here. They're asking, can data backup snapshots be automated?
Yeah. Yep. That's, one of the big selling features of Rubrik. One of the reasons why I joined was, because of Rubrik's APIs. So every single thing that's done within that UI simply just calls an underlying API. So every single new feature as it's being developed, there's strict requirements with the Rubrik engineers that we have to develop APIs for this. So It's certainly a 100% API-first architecture, and you can automate nearly everything. If you look at build.rubric.com, you'll see a number of examples of things that we've automated, that our customers have automated, and different things like that.
Very nice. I love that automation. Let's see, Lucas is asking, does Rubrik inherit the policies from the security groups or from the VPC levels, or both?
That's a good question as well. So that, I would assume that's when we're, restoring back into the cloud, and absolutely, we'll inherit, the policies of, whatever you have set up when we're restoring those EC2 instances. And we also give you the ability to, apply different policies during the restore process as well. And beyond that, you can apply, different sizing to the EC2 instances and different things like that. So there's sort of an option there. You can just throw it in and let it inherit, what's set up, or we can, set brand new policies on it.
Nice. Another question, can Rubrik support GCP? And I know you already covered Azure, but does it support GCP and Azure is the question.
Yep. So we support for what we call Cloud Out, the archive functionality. We support, the big three, GCP, AWS, and Azure. For Cloud On, that's our ability to take those archived, virtual machines or whatever they may be, and actually convert them to a native cloud instance and run them within the cloud. In that instance, we support AWS and Azure, with GCP on the roadmap. And then for cloud native protection, obviously we support, the three clouds, AWS, Azure, and GCP.
Yeah, good point there, clarifying cloud out versus cloud in. I like that. All right, next question from Ted. How does Rubrik make their backups tamper-proof?
That's a great question. And it's something that is, super applicable now with the whole zero trust and the ransomware landscape. So it all starts really with our custom file system. So our custom file system is called Atlas. That's an internal name for it. But essentially, it's an immutable append-only file system. So even when Rubrik's taking, writing backups, we can't overwrite a previous bit or a previous block. It has to be appended only, and then we, logically, virtually build those and assemble those to present it back. So the data is never presented via like NFS or SMB or anything that ransomware is going to go and find and encrypt. So it does have to get through, our custom-built file system, and then even then, every single call into that file system is authorized and authenticated. And Rubrik trusts, basically, it's a zero trust approach. So we trust no one, not even ourselves. So all inter-node communication, and even communication between the node itself is fully authenticated and authorized.
Excellent. Yeah, I like that immutability there. Another question here, and I think it's probably the final question we have time for in our live Q&A, and that is just how should folks get started with Rubrik?
Yeah, absolutely. Head to rubric.com. We're currently developing, sort of test drive capabilities, so labs that you can play with. But definitely head to rubric.com, reach out. We can get you in touch, with an account team for your area. And, if you want to there's different trials and different things that we can set you up with and get you up and running and, playing with Rubrik and seeing if it's the right fit for you.
Awesome. All right. Well, really, really cool demo, Mike. Thank you so much for sharing that. There are many questions there still for you in the electronic queue, but thanks so much for being on the event.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, everybody.
And thank you to everyone there who responded to the poll question. We do appreciate your feedback on that. If you click on the Handouts tab and click on Rubrik, there's a link there to the Rubrik Live event series, where you can sign up to a series of live events to get to know Rubrik and learn more. All right, so I'll leave the poll up while I announce our next prize winners. On the event today, we have an Amazon $500 gift card. This one's going to Dan San Buenaventura from Illinois. Congratulations. And our next grand prize is going to Rodrigo Aguilla from Georgia. Congratulations to the prize winners on the event today. All right, so with that, I'm excited now to bring in our next presenter on today's Megacast. Welcome, Mr. Peter Ellerman, Director of Product Marketing at Druva. Hey, Peter, it's great to have you on.
Great. Thanks for introducing me. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir. Take it away.
Okay, great. Thank you all for joining. I'm going to talk to you really about the value of data protection as a service for your VMs, for your virtual environment, and wherever you may be running it. And Druva offers a SaaS platform, and by delivering data protection as a service, our goal is to help you address some of the challenges that you have with traditional data protection. And one of the things that we see is, and you can see from the picture here, is that it turns out it takes a lot of infrastructure to run data protection, not just in your data center, but you need to cover remote offices. And more importantly, everyone is running typically some type of workload or putting some type of data up in the cloud, right? And in fact, you may be running some of those applications in the cloud. And so, what that means is that the data center really isn't as often sort of the center of gravity for where some of your data may be. And so when you take your kind of traditional infrastructure, whether you're building your own software and putting a hardware stack behind that, or even just sort of deploying some type of appliance, you've got to do that in multiple places to get that coverage, or maybe you've got to deploy some virtual appliances. So that makes both that management piece difficult, and really leads to some storage inefficiencies that combined ultimately, increase your TCO, right? Your total cost of ownership, because whether it's sort of stranded storage that you have that's often native to any type of on-premise hardware deployment, or just the time it takes for your team to test, deploy, and keep updated sort of your platform. And ultimately doing some of these tasks can slow down what I think would be your goal, which is how do I, as a person or our team, how do we support the business moving faster? How do we support the business, perhaps, whether it's spinning up a new office or putting new workloads in the cloud? How can we ensure that data is protected? And so, these ultimately these are the challenges and some of the consequences you have. Now, with a cloud-based solution, you really have this ability to protect that data efficiently wherever it lives. So you can still protect the data that you have living in your data center, living in a remote office. You can protect that data as it moves to the cloud. So a hybrid workload, perhaps you're moving some of your NAS data to the cloud. You can protect cloud workloads. So native cloud workloads you might be running, SaaS application, and you can cover those endpoints. And so by sort of centralizing all that data in the cloud, you get a lot of synergies. So what does it take really to protect all this data? It's really difficult if you're having to sort of manage new instances or deploy a lot of new infrastructure to do this. On-demand scale and eliminating infrastructure dependencies makes this a lot easier because you can sort of turn on and off things. The other thing that can make this coverage easier is when you know how much you're going to consume. When it's easy to predict, here's how much it's going to cost me to protect this data or to give it a particular SLA. The next question will be often, probably your role or your team's roles are evolving. So how easy is it for the team to sort of pick up something and say, yep, the server team or the VM team is passing something maybe to your cloud or infrastructure team. to run, are they going to be able to do that? So you want to have a consistent experience. So really the different teams can sort of cover what's appropriate for them, but not have to be a specialist, so to speak, in data protection. So you want to have that. And then it sort of goes without saying that you need security. Security is a pretty broad term, right? So you need obviously encryption. You need, frankly, what we call both operational security. You need application security, and you want security at that data level. When you can bring these together, ultimately what you're able to do is ensure a better business continuity and better resiliency for your organization. So that means you can recover that data more quickly, whether it's recovering from unfortunately like a ransomware event, perhaps it's an outage, or maybe it's a real disaster, right? As we have all heard, hurricane season picking up here in the U.S. So giving you that resilience is key. Moving to sort of an on-demand model and reducing that reliance on hardware will drive a better TCO, and ultimately, obviously, security becomes key. And so, when you can be essentially assured that data, that end-to-end connection of data is secure, protected against ransomware, and you have additional monitoring, it really helps you meet some of your compliance needs. So the Druva Cloud Platform is designed essentially for protecting all of these workload points, right? So giving you the ability not just to protect the data, but insight into that data so you can meet your data governance need, and allowing you to sort of solve some of your cyber resilience challenges. So it's not just sort of cloud backup, but integrated cloud backup and DR, right? For hybrid workloads, for your cloud workloads, and then offering value add capabilities like e-discovery, ransomware recovery, long-term data retention, et cetera. These are all capabilities that can be added on to really help you get more value from that. And that's important as you think about how am I going to protect my VMs, which we're going to get into, because whether you're running VMware stack, whether you're running Hyper-V, you may even be running some of these things or considering running them, not just in your data center, but in other locations, or perhaps even moving to, say, VMware Cloud. So that becomes a critical piece. So using a cloud-based platform to help you protect those VMs and extend or change that protection is going to give you that agility you need to make those changes and to make them quickly. So another key component is around, how do I make that experience of protecting these VMs wherever they run, right? Whether I'm running EC2 instances, or maybe I've got a new Hyper-V stack that's coming up. With a SaaS-based platform, you can have a consistent experience that's easy to access, that has role-based management, so you can obviously ensure that the right regions or right teams are accessing their data. But part of sort of transforming what you do, part of data protection as a service, is what else can be sort of added to make your job easier so you don't have to do things as much. And so a SaaS platform can deliver things like insights and recommendations around how you protect data, how you can find greater storage efficiencies, or perhaps even other things like unusual anomaly detection from whether it be from a user activity or some other event, say like lots of data movement. A SaaS platform makes it easy to get started as well. So by removing an infrastructure dependency, if you want to just start protecting a new workload in the cloud, perhaps you're doing some test dev, or perhaps you're actually just starting one of your first deployments in the cloud, it's easy to spin it up and have it there running. And then, of course, it's on demand. And then last is that notion of, how do you keep your infrastructure up to date? SaaS platform gets rid of that. And it's always updated. You're always on the latest version. So you don't need to worry about, is my platform on the latest version, whether it be from a security perspective or whether it's from a sort of a patching perspective or getting the latest features. The other thing is, when you think about how am I going to protect my VMs, the question is, I'm protecting my VMs, but am I able to do more with my backup data? Can I sort of make that data work for me? And a SaaS platform makes that easier. That Druva offers not only ransomware protection, which I'll talk about a bit more, but the ability to sort of do things like ransomware recovery and do that sort of at scale and quickly. If you can build in compliance checks to simplify what your team needs to do from an audit perspective, and you can do that easily without having to install or run new software, that's a big value add. If you can leverage machine learning insights that are in the cloud to better optimize the data you're backing up, we call that storage insights, that's going to reduce your cost. It's going to reduce the amount of data you're managing. And then once that data is in the cloud, what else can you do with it to make things faster? And so one-click automated cloud DR for your VMware and AWS workloads is a great example of that, and can be a powerful tool for, again, even responding to things like ransomware threats. If you need to recover a certain number of VMs in sort of a test or a test environment, you can do that with Cloud DR, because you can simply create a target VPC and fail over into that VPC as you need be. So as I mentioned just on the previous slide, ransomware recovery is important, but you need foundational protection. And then what's nice is, okay, I know my data is protected, but what other tools can I get to actually make that recovery process easier? So on the foundational side, a cloud platform can offer you multi-layer defense, or some folks use the term zero trust security. We've got that built in so that only the Druva data, only Druva, for example, can access your backup data. There's no way that you or any other kind of agent can do. So by ensuring that you've got immutable backups, you've got a SaaS platform that's running in AWS. So we're leveraging AWS's network security, plus we have our own security team that's managing it. You've got a strong posture for your platform, if you will, right? And then the second piece is, well, what else could I do though if I were attacked? And so our ransomware recovery capabilities lets you do more by essentially offering workflow orchestration, right, to help you with that recovery process, allowing you to leverage data intelligence from other security platforms you might have, and to share Druva data with those security platforms, and then tools to help you ultimately identify. So if you need to quarantine data, you can do that, or if you need to select, because often when you're in a recovery process where you're trying to identify where, at what point in time systems became infected, you may or may not be, recovering all data from a given point in time. So we offer some tools to help you accelerate that process. Don't have time to go in depth here, but the point is sort of what kind of tools can I have on top of the built-in ransomware protection that I get from the cloud platform. So Cloud DR is helpful not just for improving your disaster recovery capabilities, but as I mentioned, it can help you recover from a ransomware attack. Now, one of the values, one of the reasons customers choose Druva is when I go to cloud backup, the fact that I have DR built in means I don't need a secondary site. I don't need to maintain that standby infrastructure in order to recover. And so what you see here is both Druva offers Cloud DR for your hybrid workloads as well as cloud workloads that you may be running in AWS. And it's automatically that data is secure. When we perform a failover, what we do is we failover from the Druva cloud into your VPC, and it's an optimized process. So for your hybrid workloads, you can fail over a VM and really sort of get an RTO of minutes. So typically that's between 15 and 30 minutes, and typically sort of your RPO is about an hour, but depending on the workload, it could be less. So you're able to get a highly efficient and fast failover process for what would typically be tier 1 and below workloads. So yeah, sure, you're not going to use this for your tier 0 workloads, but for everything else, it's a very effective process. It's automated because we have built-in runbook orchestration. So it allows you to sort of determine the order of failover, to add pre and post scripts. But we sort of go beyond that. We do a VM failover validation. So we actually, this is part, because as we all know, the Achilles heel of any DR process is its ability to perform successfully. So doing a failover validation check to make sure that the conversion of those VMs is going to happen successfully, and then actually allowing you to sort of test that on a regular basis. And say for our cloud workloads, you can schedule automated tests and get reports on that on a regular basis. And then failback capability for many customers is pretty important. You're in the cloud, but at some point you need to be able to fail back. So having that capability sort of as a click of a button is equally important to the failover process, so you can close the loop. I love the story of Manchester, University of Manchester in the UK. They were on a cloud journey, and they were running multiple on-premise products. And the challenge was, they looked at trying to run these products in the cloud to protect their VMware cloud infrastructure, and it just became sort of cost prohibitive. And so the question is, was there a better way to do this so that I don't have to run a virtual instance of my on-prem infrastructure in the cloud? And so they looked and evaluated Druva, and with Druva, it's all cloud-based, so you don't need to run anything in the cloud. Druva is already running there for you. In addition, by sort of consolidating all of their data with one solution and in the cloud, they were able to drive significant storage reductions because Druva uses global deduplication, and because Druva can actually dedupe across your SDDCs. So doesn't matter how many of those you might have in the cloud, we'll dedupe across those to drive additional value. So by putting the data in the cloud, it drove a significant reduction, not only in storage, but the as-a-service capabilities, what Druva was delivering by removing that infrastructure management. That team was able to sort of do more, expand the services that it was going to deliver to customers, because it just didn't need to spend as much time worrying about backup or DR for that matter. So now they could start working on migrating other applications to the cloud. So again, an important point is you think about, how much time do I want to spend protecting my VMs or my VM real estate? As I see it's changing, the question is you want to protect it, you want to know it's secure, and you want to ensure that you can recover that data and have a resiliency plan. And so, how can the tools I'm using today do that and help me do more? And we really believe at Druva that the direction for that is data protection as a service, so that we're removing a lot of the traditional tasks you need to do, so you can focus on those value adds. If you haven't heard of Druva before, here's a few stats on us. thousands of customers. We run 2 billion plus backups a year. So if you want to translate that into a daily stat, it's a lot. Significant growth and a really high NPS score, Net Promoter Score, I'd point out. I mean, customers just love not just the platform, but the support experience as well, and that's important, right? And then, of course, we're global, and the amount of data that we're managing, 200 plus petabytes under management. We are really the largest SaaS-based data protection platform out there today. Another thing is, increasingly the value of data protection as a service is being recognized. So Druva, for the first time, entered the Gartner Magic Quadrant as a visionary, and ultimately that was really a recognition for how data protection is changing. Even the Gartner Magic Quadrant went from a data center-based Magic Quadrant to what they call enterprise, really just recognizing that customers are having to protect data across more locations, data center, endpoint, cloud. And so Druva is recognized for our approach and what our solution can do. So what can you do today? Certainly grab a free trial. We'd love to get you experience to what Druva can do. We've got a great 5-step calculator if you're interested to see how Druva might be able to help from a hybrid perspective, or of course just reach out and we'd love to do something more in person. Just close out, I'll say, again, I mentioned earlier, customers love us, so you can also browse some of the peer recommendation sites, and then lots of different reports we have out there from the different analysts. So that's it. Love to get, I know perhaps some questions have come in as well, so.
Absolutely, yeah, great presentation. Yeah, great presentation, Peter. We do have some questions for you. While we do that, we're just going to bring up our poll for everyone out there that says, what additional information would you like about Druva? And wow, there's a lot of great questions here for you, Peter. First one comes from Michael here, who's asking about, what about AWS egress charges when folks need to restore? How does that work with Druva?
Yeah, there's no charges. So for your essentially there's no ingress or egress charges with Druva. So you have unlimited number of restores from the Druva cloud to your on-prem location. So we license essentially for our hybrid workloads. That's your traditional VMs, file system, NAS data, et cetera. It's just licensed based on a single metric, which is the amount of dedupe data that's consumed. So other than that, there's no other charges.
Excellent. And then there's a question here from Alyssa who's asking about air gapping and what can we do to protect the backup repository?
Right. Sure. Yeah. And so as I mentioned in the slide, so your backup data is immutable. So the data that's written in the Druva cloud is, you already have an air gap. So by sending data to the Druva cloud, you've created an air gap between your production data and your backup data, because it's separate from your network. In other words, because it's in the Druva cloud in AWS. Number two, obviously the data is encrypted in flight and it's encrypted at rest. And then number three, no one can, so it's a zero trust model. So no one, neither you nor anything else can access that backup data. So in that sense, you've got that baseline protection. So that's what we do to protect the data. I could talk a little bit more about, obviously there's the question around, well, how do I protect against sort of insider threats, right? So Druva uses multi-factor authentication. And then, as I mentioned, we have a ransomware recovery feature that can, monitor unusual behavior, both from a recovery perspective, as well as just kind data trends. And then finally, were someone to actually delete a large amount of data, we actually have capabilities to monitor that and actually to allow you to recover that. data should it have been deleted. So you can almost sort of think of it as like a recycle, recover bin type thing.
Very nice. And then what about, they're asking here, can I meet my RPO and RTO requirements with backup in the cloud?
Yeah, I mean, that's why some people are like, wow, could I ever, do this with cloud backup? And the answer is yes. I mean, there's a number, thousands of Druva customers, across industries and geographies do it and have done it. Customers like we have some MFX and Premier Networks have sort of openly, said like we got better results from our cloud data protection platform than we did from what we had on premises. And that might be because what you are running on premises, maybe it's older, maybe it's towards its end of life, maybe it hasn't been updated, or maybe it's just a result of the types of data that you're recovering. So the short answer is yes. We also offer, Druva does offer a local cache. It's called Cloud Cache. So it's a no-charge software appliance that you can deploy, and that can help if you have bandwidth limitations or very strict RTOs as well. So that's another sort of lever we can use to help you meet your RPOs and RTOs.
Awesome. And then probably the last question we have time for in our live Q&A here, they're asking, what makes Druva unique, really, in terms of the other offerings in the market?
Sure. Well, I like to think of it as like the three S's. So it's the simplicity, it's the scale, and it's the security, right? So the simplicity is, as a service, we remove both the administrative overhead and a lot of the costs involved in traditional data protection, and make it very simple for you to manage and run. The scale is we're on demand. So we can scale up compute and storage as much as you need and scale it back down, and you'll only pay for it appropriately that way. And then security, everyone is thinking and talking about security, and it's already built in to Druva. It's a zero trust security platform, and as I mentioned, we offer that operational security for that platform. So you're not having to worry about, is my data protection platform secure? You don't have to worry about whether that data is secure. And then we offer additional value add on top of that, which would help you facilitate some type of recovery, or a recovery, in the event that you had an attack or some other incident that you need to respond to.
Awesome. All right. Well, Peter, I'm afraid that's all the time we have here in our live Q&A. I see 27 other questions there for you in the queue electronically. So obviously a lot of interest in what you guys are doing at Druva. Maybe you can respond to some of those folks. Thank you so much for being on the event today.
Thank you.
And thanks to Druva for presenting on the Megacast today. Check out the handouts tab there, and you'll find a link to the top 10 predictions for data protection. Nice looking resource. Make sure that you check that out before you go. All right, I'll leave the poll up while I announce our next prize winners. We have another Amazon $500 gift card. This one's going to Katrina Harms from North Dakota. And our next grand prize, I'm envious of your new monitor, David Reed of Alaska. Wow, congratulations to David Reed of Alaska. And with that, it's now time to introduce you to our next presenter on today's Megacast. I'm excited to welcome Dane Grace, Technical Product Manager at Rapid7. Dane, are you there?
I am here. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, thanks for being on, Dane. Take it away.
Sure. So today I'm going to be discussing less about containers specifically, but more how to mentally map modern infrastructure, VRM and modern infrastructure security. And really, this journey came about as I was starting to field customer calls surrounding container security and modern infrastructure security, in that there are so many tools, and some of these tools often need to be layered onto each other in order to run workloads in the cloud, that I was getting questions like, I want to secure my containers, and there started to be this divide, whether we were talking about the workload versus the container host versus the underlying infrastructure. And I realized that there aren't a lot of great tools or methodologies out there to really map what you're running versus what you need to secure, or what you have addressed versus what you need to address. So this is sort of my attempt to demystify that and add and perhaps bring some order to a bit of chaos. So before we get started, there's a lot of nomenclature collision in this space. And so I wanted to make sure that we're all talking about the same thing at the same time. So I'm going to go through some base concepts before I really start getting through to my mapping. So what are containers and why are we containerizing our applications? So in terms of the what, as Docker defines it, a container is a standalone self-contained piece of software, packages up all the codes and everything you need to run an application quickly and reliably from place to place. Meaning in the bad old days, if you wanted to run a web application, you had to stand up, an underlying host operating system, then some sort of web server, probably a database server, then whatever application frameworks you were going to run. Then on top of that, you would run your actual application code. So that would be, a Windows server with possibly a SQL server running on the side with IIS, and then you would make sure that you have the ASP.NET modules loaded, and then your application code on top of that. While it was great and it worked, it was monolithic, and carrying it from place to place became difficult. For example, if you added a new developer, they would spend 3 days to a week setting up all their tools just to get to work. So containers aim to solve that, and they do so by making a container. You can run it on a Docker host, on a laptop, on a server, on a service in the cloud, and things really kind of travel much better, run more reliably, and are generally easier to manage, right? But with that brings a lot of overhead. I mentioned Kubernetes because there's a bit, this is another layer of complexity that comes with containers, where Kubernetes is an orchestration solution. So what does that mean? It's a platform to manage containerized workloads in an automated fashion, right? So if you have a website and you're just running one container statically, if you get a huge uptick in traffic, that would cause the whole thing to tumble. So with Kubernetes could notice that uptick in traffic and begin spinning up in additional instances of those container workloads to handle the traffic. Moreover, when the traffic drops down, it'll deinstantiate those instances so that you're not wasting compute minutes. And really, this is just an automated fashion to be able to manage those workloads, to make sure that you're using resources as efficiently as possible. So some additional terms that I'll be covering. Containers, capitalized C, this refers to the overall technology. Containerization in containers refers to all the technologies involved with running containers. A container image is a container at rest, not instantiated. It's similar to a virtual machine image where it's just sitting there. And at this point, the image is just bits on a disk, right? It's dormant software. Container lowercase c, and this is where things get confusing. A container image goes to production, is instantiated, goes live, is executing code. That is called a lowercase c container. And where possible, I will try to call out when I'm referring to uppercase or lowercase c. A container host, this is the underlying software that runs the actual container workload. This could be a Docker host, this could be containerd, this could be Kubernetes. Really, this just instantiates a container image into a lowercase c container. Container orchestration, this is Kubernetes. Kubernetes is by far the most popular solution, but there is Docker Swarm and a couple of other solutions. This is really just managing your lowercase c containers in an automated fashion. And then a container registry, this is per the Microsoft documentation, a service that stores and distributes container images and related artifacts. Docker Hub is an example of this. Azure Container Registry is an example of this. Amazon's Elastic Container Registry is another example of this. And then a container repository, and this is where things get a bit interesting. Per the Azure documentation, It's a collection of container images or other artifacts in a registry that have the same name but different tags, right? So different versions of the same container. So within a registry, you can have a repository, and that repository contains a history of an application as it's updated as separate container images. So digging into it, your organization wants to run into containers. What's the challenge here? I mean, the great news is that you have a lot of options. Amazon ECS, Amazon Elastic Kubernetes service, Google Kubernetes engine, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And the bad news is you have a lot of options and you have to secure these, right? Again, a lot of options. Oftentimes, organizations will leverage multiples of these options, partially for redundancy, partially for developer or engineer preference. There's just a lot of reasons to run a lot of these things, and the security teams become responsible for it. So not only understanding what you have out there, but understanding what you covered and at what layer you've covered it becomes really, really important. So we have containerized applications that, I mean, to summarize all of this, we have containerized applications that run on container orchestration solutions, that run on infrastructure solutions, secured by security solutions. Again, tools on tools on tools on tools. So it's a lot to keep track of, and we need a model to keep track of it. So within this model that I'm proposing, or I've developed, if you think about an X and a Y axis, you know, horizontal axis and a vertical axis, we're looking at the vertical axis, and here we are talking about layers. So these are layers of technology that you need to build on top of each other in order to run containers. And also, while I'm referring to containers, this could refer to VM instances and a lot of different, you know, cloud workloads, but we'll use containers as our lens for the purposes of this talk. So starting off, we have the infrastructure layer. This is basically the operating system layer. And this was traditionally the domain of things like Windows Server, Linux servers, BSD servers, et cetera, right? Moving up, we have the container orchestration host. So this could be things like Kubernetes, Docker, Elastic Container Service, Elastic Kubernetes Service, Google Container Service, right? All of those things. And finally, on top of that, we have the workload. This is the container, but really this is the application or the software we want to run. So this is container images. In the context of something like EC2 or Google Compute or Azure VM, this could be a virtual machine that's running on sort of their virtualization host in the cloud. Once we start digging into phases, so this is sort of the temporal domain, there's essentially three phases to cloud infrastructure, right? You have at rest, things are bits on a disk. This could be container images, container registries. This could be setting up a virtual machine, right? Getting the underlying environment set up. So this is where things like Terraform come into play. Deployment, this is when you get into really deploying and configuring services. So this is the domain of CI/CD tools, Jenkins, Atlassian Bamboo, Azure DevOps. This is when you're configuring your Kubernetes instance. This could be when you're configuring things like Elastic Cloud Compute, Azure VM, and Google Compute. This is when you're turning knobs, dialing, and turning dials to really make sure that things are running to get ready to go and ready to get running. And then finally, at runtime, this is when things are live and running and exposed to the world, right? And it's worth calling out because it's a bit of a buzzword in the industry of shift left. So shift left means everything pre-production. In the context of these phases, that's everything to the left of runtime, right? So what we're trying to do is make sure that our posture is as secure and as shored up as possible before it's exposed to the world and running. So this is something to look at, to dig into for pre-production, but that doesn't necessarily mean that if you have a shift left strategy, shift right isn't also a thing. Shift right is also very important, as we'll discuss later, because there's a number of things that could happen during the right. It's pushing on, putting this all together. This is essentially the mental model that I've developed. I call it the 9-box model or the 3x3 model of Kubernetes or continuous deployment, modern infrastructure deployment, right? So at the bottom, you have sort of the infrastructure layer, and then I've ordered these things in the terms of when vulnerabilities or misconfigurations could be introduced, right? So at rest, at the infrastructure layer, you have things like Terraform that could introduce vulnerabilities. In terms of the container host, at rest doesn't really apply. But in the workload layer, this is when container registries become important, right? This is where container images with vulnerable software could be introduced, and this is where you want to identify them. In deployment, these are things where you want to look at EC2, Linux servers, Windows servers. In the container host, this is when you want to look at Kubernetes hosts, Docker hosts, that sort of thing. And finally, moving up in the workload, this is when you want to examine container images with CI/CD tools, with solutions scripted into the CI/CD tools, as well as looking at container image scanning and those sorts of things. Digging into infrastructure, we're again, at runtime, we're looking at EC2 instances, Google Compute. You're looking at how Linux servers and Windows servers are behaving. This is a lot of more traditional VRM. We're trying to get an outsider's view and looking at what ports are available, what vulnerabilities are exposed to the world, really getting the attacker's perspective. With the container host, we're looking at policy within Kubernetes hosts of nodes, pods, etc. Also looking at the configuration of Docker hosts or ECS or ACS or Google Container Service. And then finally, at runtime, we're looking at live containers. And so what this could mean is with the container that goes live, you've done the assessment at rest, right? So you've looked at the container registry, you've identified vulnerabilities, had the engineering teams update to the latest version. You have solutions scripted into your CI/CD pipeline. So as things are going through the CI/CD pipeline, what you see is you're looking at things for rogue deployments. Have things skip the registry, and has this been pushed to a job to be pushed to production? Or if it's looking at build, what new vulnerabilities were introduced in the build pipeline? And then again, you could block these pre-productions, have pre-production, have these pushed back to developers, and have those remediate those. And then, if you're looking at things that haven't been through the build pipeline, say, hey, where did this come from? Why is this being pushed without being assessed in the registry? Or why is this the first time we've seen this? And then finally, at runtime, we're looking at what's live, and really, at runtime, I say what we're doing is we're trying to quantify exposure, right? So risk is vulnerabilities or possible entry points into your environment before the attacker can get their hands on it. And at runtime, we're looking at the exposure of risk, right? So when we're looking within the infrastructure layer, when we're looking at things like Elastic Cloud Compute, Linux servers, Windows servers, we're looking at what's available, what handholds could attackers get into, right? What's possibly available to them. With Kubernetes or container hosts, again, same thing. Could misconfigurations happen? Could these misconfigurations possibly expose something to the attacker that could be used? And again, finally, with containers, you have a container that goes live. It's been through both the registry and the CI/CD pipeline. It looks great. And then what happens is that the container goes from a container image to a lowercase c container, gets instantiated, and the first thing the container does is say, okay, well, I want to make sure I have the latest software. So it's scripted to hit an update server and look for new software packages. Pulls up those new packages into the application file system, and then what happens is any of the shift left, any of the pre-production vulnerability assessments that you've performed now become incomplete, right? Because you have new software packages that have been unexamined, and this is where runtime solutions would become incredibly powerful, right? So you can understand not only that something has changed, but what those changes are and what vulnerabilities have been introduced in that phase. Moreover, at the runtime phase, this is where you get into things like incident detection and response, where you're looking at workloads for suspicious behavior, right? And across the board, this generally means process analysis, network analysis. Are you looking at network traversal? With process analysis, are there persistent SSH sessions? Are new files being pulled in via curl commands or FTP or some sort of thing, something like that? Or is inappropriate behavior occurring, process hollowing, that sort of thing. From the Rapid7 perspective, we have a number of solutions that address this. Our container security solution has abilities to hook into not only the CI/CD pipeline, but the container registry, so we can identify vulnerabilities there so that you can take that information, security teams can take that back to development teams and really push that back. In terms of our pre-deployment, we have CI/CD plugins for infrastructure, so that you can look at configurations and be able to make suggestions or show policy compliance there via our Insight CloudSec availability. And then with our scan engines and traditional hosts where we can scan VMs or underlying host layers or have our Rapid7 agent installed on the host, we can identify if there are software vulnerabilities, misconfigurations occurring, and really be able to provide those, provide that information to teams. So really taking a deep look into that and being able to identify all of that. So with this 9-box model, my intention here would be you have a team that has recently begun to tackle, you know your organization has containers and you've begun the process of being able to tackle, are we securing these things? What are the vulnerability posture look like for all of these things? What is the runtime posture looking at this? Now, the temptation is just to say, okay, we'll scan images and identify vulnerabilities there. But again, as we've illustrated through this mental model here, right? This leaves out the deployment and runtime phases, or possibly if you're looking just at the workload, you might have a vulnerable container host or vulnerable infrastructure host. All of those risks, all of the exposure of that risk, all of that attack surface matters, right? So being able to walk up and down, left to right on this mental model, I am hoping provide security teams with a way to organize the domains that they need to master so that they can make sure they're so they can organize what they need to address, what they haven't addressed, and where they need to go. And so to that end, let's look at some real world examples of things going wrong and how this model may have been effective for that. So in terms of an infrastructure layer, let's say that you were using a CPSM solution, right, and looking at the container host and really looking at the container workloads as well, right? So you have registry scanning available, you have registry assessments happening, you have CI/CD assessments happening, you even have visibility into runtime both on the container host layer and on the container workload layer. But you have an underlying OS, let's say Docker running on a Windows server or a Linux server or something like that, and you won't really keep an eye on that. There's been instances of Windows and Linux devices being hijacked, and you'll see cryptojacking as sort of a running theme here. Really with these cloud workloads and the cloud infrastructure, attackers see this as unlimited compute power for them. So taking over or being able to breach these assets gives them the ability to crypto mine basically and make money that way. So that's a lot of the value prop to attackers and a lot of the attacks that we see. And so this is an example of securing that infrastructure layer is important because those are visible to the attackers and they can traverse upwards to be able to say, get a hold of the underlying host OS and then install a container with a crypto mining operation on it and be able to literally cause monetary costs that way. Pushing on. So the container orchestration host layer incidents, these are probably the most recent. In these attacks, what attackers are doing is they basically scan the internet from an outsider's perspective and look for misconfigured Kubernetes kubelets. Once they find those, there are a number of remote code execution attacks they can leverage against those Kubernetes instances. And that would give them basically admin privileges on that Kubernetes instance. And again, they're able to install crypto mining containers on that Kubernetes instance. And because Kubernetes will scale as needed for load, it would just scale that up, and they would have this massive Monero mining, crypto coin mining cluster, and they would exfiltrate those coins as they're being developed. This is particularly destructive to organizations because this is dollars and cents cost. Amazon, Azure, Google all charge by compute minutes, by the amount of usage, and crypto coin operations are necessarily heavy. So with this, we see damages, monetary damages to organizations, and it's something of big concern. And then finally, with the workload layer incident, this is really at rest, and with public repositories such as Docker Hub, and there are a couple of others, there have been a number of attacks where attackers have created either clones of legitimate repositories that look close enough, or have, in some cases, leveraged credentials to replace container images in public repositories. And these are for often used images such as Alpine Linux, Python, a number of lesser known software packages the developers would pull down to build their container images. And what they've done, they've created malicious versions of these images that had their malware tooling built into the image. And so a developer, whomever, would unsuspectingly download this image, use it in their internal applications and for their organization's applications, and that tooling would be available for the attackers to make use of, either via Trojaning, via remote access, all sorts of things. And so this is one of those things where having a container image scanning solution or CSCD solution, some sort of shift left solution of understanding if a container image was legitimate or not, as well as enforcing code signing, would have been very powerful. And this is just an example of sort of at the workload layer incident of securing the workload becomes really, really important. So, as we're digging through that mental model, just examples of where things go wrong within that mental map. So again, just to kind of recap, with that 3x3 or that 9-box model, this isn't so much, this is where you plug your tools in, but a way to get that 1,000-foot view over all of the tools that get deployed in these containers environment, and allowing security teams to walk through it and be able to say, okay, if we're deploying Docker on an underlying host operating system, either in a data center or in EC2 or Azure VM or Google Compute, do we have this VM secured in such a way or configured in such a way that we are not exposing ourselves to new vulnerabilities? And that's across the board, right? That's pre-deployment. Are we configured before deployment? And once we're in runtime, do we have any instances that these misconfigurations are exposed, right? Or are we using an insecure version of the operating system? Moving on to the container host, again, looking at Docker host, your Kubernetes instances, and not just one in Azure, but if your company is leveraging this in a data center on Azure and AWS, are we assessing Kubernetes across the board? Do we have the tooling to assess these to assess these footholds or these points of exposure, this attack surface. Are we addressing that across the board? Both pre-production in terms of making sure that we have, golden configuration standards for Kubernetes instances, et cetera, either leveraging things like CS benchmarks, et cetera. And then also monitoring those solutions at runtime. What does that look like from the attacker's perspective, right? And then finally, moving up into the container workload, do we have container image scanning? Are we addressing, the containers as they're being stored at rest? And then within the CI/CD pipeline, are we detecting rogue deployments within the CI/CD pipeline? Are we aware of containers that are getting pushed to production that have never touched our registries or repositories? Moreover, if they are we able to perform vulnerability assessments and block those deployments, right? And then finally, are we monitoring our containers at runtime, both for new vulnerability content, as well as for misbehavior? And what do our containers look like from the attacker's perspective? So being able to take that whole mental model, walk up, down, left, and right of it, and allow teams to really dig in and make sure that they're addressing all of the areas of concern. So that's sort of my spiel for this. Let's dig into questions. Finally, at the top, Docker Kubernetes is so costly to use. What is the solution to decide who wants to use it, but in a cheaper cost? Generally speaking, the answer here, and this is more of a DevOps and deployment question, but generally speaking, running containers in a non-persistent manner is the way to go. So Kubernetes is one answer with that, in so much as it will increase or decrease your workloads according to demand. So you're not just standing up, 100 instances of your application and constantly having those running. Kubernetes will descale that as necessary. But then another answer is serverless deployment, something like an AWS Fargate, where it's essentially dormant until needed, and then it instantiates everything, runs for as long as it needs to run, and then disinstantiates the entire infrastructure so that you're not getting charged for things that you're not using. So, I mean, there's some cost-effective ways to do that, but really that would be a matter of digging into your use case and understanding what makes sense for you. Are we compatible with VMware Tanzu? So we support a number of VMware products natively. In terms of the container host and container workload, we're really not interested. We're interested in more so in Docker and Kubernetes as sort of like classes of technology, as well as the container image, especially in the workload layer. So our idea there being that we can support just about any of the infrastructure running in public cloud. In terms of on-premise infrastructure, yeah, I mean, if there's an underlying host layer, we have wide coverage with our scan engine and agent technology. We have one question pushed out. Can Rapid7 be used in a public cloud environment or private cloud environment? Sorry. Yes, it can be, as long as we have we have a way through the network to reach back to our cloud apparatus for live assessment. But yeah, we're totally able to do that. Where does Rapid7 differentiate themselves from its key competitors? So I think there's a couple of answers there. One is our single pane of glass, right? Where within the Rapid7 suite of products, and this is across Insight VM, Insight IDR, Insight AppSec, and our Insight Cloud Security product, we really can cover the gamut of your needs, right? So if we're looking at the risk reduction side of it, so Insight VM and Insight Cloud Sec, Insight VM can handle your traditional assets, and we have options for your cloud architecture as well, right? So we have the ability to identify workloads running on things like EC2. and that's either via our discovery connections, our Insight agent, or our credentialed scan if we're able to scan those assets. In terms of the container workload, we have our container VRM feature so that we can assess container images for vulnerabilities both in the CI/CD pipeline as well as in the registry. We also have our Rapid7 Kubernetes monitor, and we can identify running containers in Kubernetes, so we can give you that view of exposure. On more traditional architectures, meaning you have a container host running on a host OS with workloads on top of that, both of our agents and our credentialed scans will not only identify vulnerabilities in that underlying host OS, not only in Dockers or Kubernetes according to CIS benchmarks, but we'll identify the running workloads on top of those, and we're able to correlate the vulnerabilities we're able to correlate the workloads back to vulnerabilities we've assessed in your shift left strategy. Digging into Insight CloudSec, Insight CloudSec is sort of the amalgam of our VM expertise wrapped in our technology that we got in our recent acquisitions with both DivvyCloud and Allseed. That gives you cloud posture and security management, as well as policy enforcement across cloud environments. And we're talking Insight VM, AWS, Azure, Google Cloud, some Alibaba, right? As well as with Allseed as a specialty Kubernetes vendor, giving you that deep visibility into Kubernetes vulnerability and remediation management, as well as runtime assessment of the Kubernetes host itself. So you can get understanding of what Kubernetes is doing. Is our nodes and pods being spun up, configured according to your policy benchmarks? Are they configured against CIS benchmarks? Those sorts of things. Live at runtime. Not is this host pre-production configured the best way possible, but we can look at the underlying infrastructure that will run workloads, and does those individual instantiations actually look secure, and are they meeting your policy benchmarks, which is super powerful. And then when you're looking at it, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead, Dana. I just wanted to mention that we're running out of time here in our live Q&A, but if you want to wrap up answering that question, go ahead.
Definitely, yeah. So, and then with Insight IDR, we'll just go to Insight AppSec. With Insight AppSec, we can look at application level vulnerabilities. So being able to dig in from the attacker's perspective, looking at web apps, et cetera, that are live, and seeing what vulnerability exposure and what your attack surface looks like from that side. So really, when you look at it, I think the breadth of offering that Rapid7 offers is very difficult to match, both in terms of all three of the temporal domains and all three of the sort of the technology layers. Thanks for your time, everyone, and I hope that was helpful.
Absolutely, yeah. Great presentation, Dane. Thank you so much for being on the event today. All right, and I want to remind everyone to check out the poll question that's on the screen right there. What additional information would you like about Rapid7? I'll leave that up while I announce our next set of prize winners. We have an Amazon $500 gift card going to Jose Martinez from California, and our next grand prize going to Michael Staybeck from California as well. Congratulations. All right, so thank you to everyone who responded there to the poll. It's now time for our next presentation on the Megacast. Excited to have back on Mr. Andy Fernandez, Senior Product Marketing Manager at Zerto. Andy, take it away.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's session here in Actual Tech Media. This session is sponsored by Zerto, and the title is Converged Disaster Recovery and Backup. My name is Andy Fernandez. I'm a Senior Manager of Product Marketing here at Zerto, a Hewlett-Packard company, and I'm very excited to be here and thankful for your time. We will make sure that we get to all of your questions on the chat, and let's get to it. So as you all are familiar with, whether you are a CIO, a VP of IT, an IT manager, backup, or system administrator, we're all facing similar challenges at different depths. Every organization, whether it's an organization only protecting a couple applications or a large-scale enterprise, faces the same type of challenges. We're all seeing a massive growth in data, but also where that data is located, where that data is hosted, and how it's managed. Sometimes I don't even like using the term acceleration of cloud because really it's around cloud adoption. It's not only how can you get to the cloud, but how can you actually succeed and make sure that you unlock the outcomes that you were looking for in the first place, whether business or tech outcomes. But most importantly, what we're seeing now is ransomware. This is something that here at Azure we've been discussing for years, but we're only seeing the growth of ransomware attacks go in both severity and volume. Attacks are getting more sophisticated, they're asking for more money, and they're also more damaging. So with all of these challenges, both with making sure your business is secure, safe, and that your data and operations are available from ransomware attacks or any other type of disruption, to also making sure that you're accomplishing your digital transformation initiatives and IT goals. That's a lot of responsibility for an organization. It's a lot of responsibility from an infrastructure perspective on the I&O team as well. And while you're doing all this and making sure you keep the lights on, organizations are in the C-levels also requiring more availability, better SLAs. Let's get operational faster. Let's make sure we get that data there faster and continue resuming operations instead of facing disruptions. So with that, organizations, tend to manage things with tools and say, well, we need tools to solve for all of these challenges that we face. And that's what we see today. In today's organizations, we see organizations IT pros face the same types of responsibility. Whether the backup, the disaster recovery, the cloud teams are all separate, as a cohesive unit, they still face the same challenges, right? When a file is corrupted or deleted, that backup team has to be able to restore that very quickly, whether it's an email or something else as well. Then you also need to be able to host data somewhere long term, being able to archive data for compliance and regulatory purposes. And sometimes you have to recover that data back. These are the traditional backup scenarios, right? But then you have natural disasters. Then you have DR events, whether it's, you live in Southeast US and you're having to deal with hurricanes, tornadoes, fires in the West Coast, or even ransomware, which we consider both a DR and a backup scenario, are all significant challenges. So as an organization, you also have to not only manage the restoration of data via backup, but also being able to fail over an entire site, being able to recover those applications and resume operations, whether it's an actual disaster, like a natural disaster, ransomware, or even something like a hardware outage as well. And let's assume that this was all happening on premises, and now you are asked to move away from that secondary site and start using the public cloud, right? C-level, the board wants to move towards OpEx and avoid additional CapEx expenses. So with that in mind, you now are expected to also move to the cloud. And while you're doing all of this, while you're having to manage all of these consistent responsibilities, you also have to make sure you keep a consistent eye on ransomware, being able to recover from it. It's something that's not a matter of if, but when it happens. And it's not just the security team's responsibility anymore. It's also the infrastructure's side's responsibility to be able to recover that data itself. So with all of these responsibilities, how do organizations respond? What type of tools do they use? What we see here is the traditional, what I would call a legacy data protection stack, and I mean DR and backup. And this comes from an organization that probably inherited a couple of tools from other users that were within this IT team. And let's say it started on premises, a simple VMware environment using a colo facility. They realized, one, you need a backup tool. You need a backup tool to be able to quickly restore data, and you need a tool to be able to also recover data that is stored long term. But realize that backup really, using VM snapshots and that type of technology, it's not DR. You can't resume operations and get a business operational using backup. You need DR, you need replication. So then they go ahead and they buy a DR solution. Right, so maybe in this environment, you're using Commvault, Veeam, Rubrik, Cohesity, and then an additional DR solution like RecoverPoint. But then you realize maybe with RecoverPoint or the type of replication solution you're using, there are a lot of challenges there. Not only on being fixed to storage, but also challenges on not having the ideal orchestration automation, the ideal workflows, especially for an enterprise. So then you bring in another tool, right, like an SRM, something like that. So now, in order to manage and protect this data, you're already using multiple tools. And then what happens? Then you expect it to move to the cloud. Your C-level board says that you need to move to AWS. So then what happens? You probably have to use another tool, something like a Cloud Endure, to use the public cloud. So just to be able to move, protect, and manage your data, regardless of its tier 1 or non-production kind of test dev workloads, you still have completely different UIs, completely different products, technologies. This means that you have to spend more time training, more time configuring, more time managing, and really there's not an ideal scenario here because your team also doesn't really gain expertise on any of this, just does what you need to do in order to manage all these tools. This is not an ideal scenario. This takes a lot of time, a lot of reactive technology, and a lot of reactive behavior that happens here. So what can you do that's differently? How do you avoid a flurry of tools for different things that are very closely related, but you can't really use one for the other? What do you do there? What we recommend is actually using Zerto. Because of the way that Zerto technology is built and how it's adapted, it's explicitly equipped to be able to help you with this. So at a very high level, what we do here at Zerto is we help manage, protect, recover, and move data and applications across on-premises and cloud with a single, simple, scalable platform. What does this all actually mean? Well, with Zerto, you have one user interface, the Zerto Virtual Manager. This means that this is the one solution that you use for everything. To be able to restore a file or a folder instantly, locally, for production, you can do that with Zerto. To be able to recover a VM or an application, you can also do that with Zerto. Being able to perform a DR scenario, not just backup, being able to, within a couple of clicks, fail over an entire data center, you can do that with Zerto. And being able to also not just use primary storage, but be able to store data long-term and be able to recover from it, you can also use Zerto. The same interface, the same mechanism, and the same technology for all of these activities that you're probably currently using 2 to 3 tools for. And then as we already stated as well, for those organizations that were on premise and then had to move to the cloud, they had to get another tool. With Zerto, the same way that we protect and manage these applications, we can do from a migration perspective as well. So you're able to simply select the data that you want to move over to public cloud or maybe another data center or even a service provider. You're able to do that very quickly and without disruption. So how can we do this? How can we differentiate by not having to use legacy backup solutions, very simple DR solutions? How do we get the best of both worlds? It all starts with our core technology, our replication. What makes Zerto's replication special is that one, it's not array-based replication. Think recover point where you're stuck to a specific hardware. This is software-only replication that happens at the hypervisor level. It's built to be software only, and I mean that, meaning that there are no agents. And this is a scale-out architecture. So whether you're protecting 10 VMs, 1,000, 10,000, Zerto works the same, and there's no difference in the performance there as well. This replication, essentially think of it as being able to observe and replicate changes every 5 seconds. So instead of using VM snapshots, you're using replica checkpoints that are every 5 seconds. That is an RPO of 5 seconds. This works anywhere, whether it's on-premise, whether it's on the public cloud or a service provider, Zerto works the same. You don't have to use the traditional scheduling, the traditional snapshots or agents that are required for backup solutions, but you still get that consistency and that granularity of checkpoints that you can't really get with any other solution. How does this compare to the backup solutions of the world, right? Because you're thinking, yeah, I understand DR, but using Zerto for DR and backup, what does that performance look like? Well, if you think about your backup solution, right, a Veeam, Commvault, Rubrik, Cohesity, whatever it is, these solutions, have very archaic or new forms of continuous data protection. They're very limited. Zerto has innovated continuous data protection from the beginning, from a decade ago, and we have mastered it and continued to improve upon it. Now, what this means is that at Zerto, as I mentioned, you're replicating every 5 seconds. Every 5 seconds, you have an ability to go to a different checkpoint. That's thousands a day. Now, if you're using a backup solution, usually because of the impact on production, because of the cumbersome management of VM snapshots, you're usually limited to a daily backup job. So think of the scenario of ransomware or any other scenario, really, any DR scenario. You are not able to restore within a couple of checkpoints. You have to go back to the previous day's copy. This introduces a lot of data loss inherently. Even if your backup solution is working very well, you're still suffering from data loss. And that's an RPO conversation, right? We know that when compared with converged DR and backup, Zerto gives you RPOs of seconds. Traditional backup companies are giving you RPOs of hours. Now, what about RTOs? As important as our near synchronous always on replication is, so is our journaling technology. If the replication is providing the data, journaling technology is giving you the ability to quickly restore and get access to that data. What I mean by that is, think about it. You have thousands of recovery points that you can select from with Zerto. The mechanism that simplifies that into a couple of clicks is the journal. So whether you're looking to fail over an entire site, recover or restore an application, VM, or file or folder, you're able to simply do that using the journal. And the way that you do that is you're simply able to select the checkpoints, right? As I'm showing here on the screen, you can select and configure these checkpoints and recover an entire application consistently. This helps from an RTO perspective. There's orchestration and automation built into this, and it helps you get that data quicker. Not only select the checkpoint that you want, but also it's just a few clicks to then perform that recovery or restore. Now, I mentioned RPO, I mentioned RTO from a journal perspective and how fast you can select that data, but what about application consistency? What I mean by application consistency is if you think about the nature of multi-VM applications, right, the enterprise level, you are performing using backup technology and incremental job. So as you perform this backup job overnight, all of the VMs that belong to that application are being recorded or a snapshot is being performed at different points in time. What that leads to is a very inconsistent, difficult, lengthy recovery. So you have to go and select and identify the exact checkpoint where they're all consistent. Now imagine doing this across all applications. Imagine doing this across a large-scale ransomware attack. This extends your RTO significantly. And a lot of organizations, have accepted a certain amount of data loss. And at Zerto, we reduce and completely eliminate hours of data loss and record it to seconds. But RTO affects weekends. That's where organizations spend rebuilding file directories and having a very difficult time getting this application up and running and getting that data back consistently. How do we do that differently? At Zerto, the way that we're able to solve for this is treating these applications and all of the VMs that belong to them at one consistent, single, cohesive unit. As you begin using Zerto, you simply select all of the VMs that belong to this application, configure them, set your recovery settings, SLAs, everything that you need. And when the moment happens where you have to recover an application, you simply select the checkpoint and all the VMs that belong to that application get recovered at the same point in time. Doesn't matter what the checkpoint is, they will be recovered at the same point in time. This helps incredibly from an RTO perspective and just helping the IT organization remove a lot of the pain associated with recovering applications. Now, I've talked a lot about speeds and feeds in a way, and it's about how can Zerto eliminate your data loss, how can Zerto eliminate your unplanned downtime. Not just about how do we do it for DR backup, but simply how can we help you get your data back. Now, from a business perspective, Zerto also delivers a ton of value. Think about it from a total cost of ownership perspective. And the reason that is one, using Zerto, you're consolidating the need for all these solutions that you had to use before. Instead of having to pay, manage, configure a DR solution, an orchestration solution, a backup solution, even a migration solution, you're simply just using one scalable licensing mechanism. It's very straightforward on a per VM level with Zerto. Now, you're also reducing the costs associated with downtime and data loss. You don't have to go ahead and pay a ransom. You don't have to spend additional money on appliances or hardware or on storage that's required. For example, with Recover Point, you need to have the same type of storage in order for it to work. With Zerto, it doesn't matter. It's the infrastructure that works for you. Zerto can replicate there. You combine that with a simple software approach, and we see that organizations save over 50% in total cost of ownership. So it's a big deal because Zerto delivers that value on a business level, and it delivers that value on a tech level. And one of our customers has explicitly seen this value. So if we look at the example of TaxSlayer, their CIO, Eric Bradley, makes an important quote here, and it's managing DR and backup in Zerto changes the game for us. We have a much deeper granularity from an RPO perspective and one single pane of glass to manage both processes. When TaxSlayer moved away from Veeam to use Zerto, they saw over 10% in direct savings when they were able to consolidate. But also the amount of time they spent on the solution and activities reduced as well. So when it used to take 6 hours to restore SharePoint with Veeam, it now takes 15 minutes. When it used to take 2 hours for maintenance Windows, it also now takes 15 minutes. And there's a near zero impact to customers. So that's the value you really achieve, not only on how much money are you spending, how much infrastructure are you using, how much time are you dedicating to this. It's a matter of consolidating all these tools into one simple experiences. It saves you time, but also improves your SLAs as well. So with that, I want to provide you with a few assets and key reading information so you can find out more about this. So there's two things I want to leave with you. One is the Gorilla Guide to Continuous Backup and Recovery. This is the Express Edition. Now, with the Express Edition, you get an insight into what is the day-to-day of a IT admin, somebody who focuses on backup. And when you look at that day-to-day, how does Zerto impact that? How does Zerto's technology makes your SLAs better, makes the experience easier, but also makes the backup admin's life a lot easier as well. And if you want more competitive, detailed information, take a look at this white paper that we have, and it's called the Zerto versus traditional backup. So you can kind of get a deeper dive into all of the things that I've talked to today around how Zerto is better for backup. So with that in mind, I want to move over now to some of the questions that you may have. I may not be able to get to all of these questions, but I will be able to get to them in the chat box as well. And so with that, I want to thank you for your time, and I want to thank you for your attention today. I hope you have a great day.
All right, thanks so much. A really great presentation, Andy. We do appreciate that. I've just brought up the poll question for everyone out there that says, what additional information would you like about the Zerto solution? And there's a ton of questions coming in here for Zerto. We do appreciate those. I'm routing those over to Andy to respond to as quickly as he can. I'll just leave that poll question up while I announce the winner of our next set of prizes. And hopefully Andy can respond to as many of these electronic questions as we have time for here in the event. So thank you so much for all the great questions. All right, our next Amazon $500 gift card prize winner is Dave Held from Illinois. Congratulations, Dave Held from Illinois. And then our final grand prize winner for another one of these awesome 49-inch gaming monitors. This is going to Jim Petraka from New Jersey. Congratulations, Jim Petraka from New Jersey. I will post all the prize winners in the questions pane. All right, thank you for all those responses to the poll. We do appreciate your feedback. Congratulations to all the prize winners. Before you go, I want to remind you to check out the 10 on Tech podcast, which is over in the iTunes store. Don't forget about the Gorilla Guide Book Club. It's over at gorilla.guide. It's also there in the Handouts tab. And then at the end of the event, you'll be automatically referred to our Refer a Friend page. So we appreciate your participation in that. If you are a potential sponsor of an upcoming Megacast or EcoCast, reach out to us at connect@actualtechmedia.com, and we would love to chat about having you on. And with that, it's time to wrap up today's event. I hope that I will see you on our next upcoming event, which is an EcoCast happening next week on supporting, improving, and securing finance, IT, and cloud environments. So if you're in the fintech space in any shape or form, this is going to be a great event just dedicated to you. Hope to see you there next Thursday. And of course, hope that you will join us on other upcoming Actual Tech Media events. You can always go to events.actualtechmedia.com and register for all of our upcoming webinars, EcoCast, Megacast, and Summit events. So I hope that you learned a lot on the event today. I know that I did. We'll see you next time. Have a great day.